So here with the Boatman, and Boatman, can you tell us, as far as in Muskegon, how you got started?
My first job in radio was at Magic 98 in North Muskegon. And I first became interested in radio when I was like 8 years old. We had a job fair at Twin Lake Elementary. People came in. Well, it wasn't a job fair. It was a career day. And people came in and they were telling us about their jobs, what they did for a living. A couple guys came in from WMUS. They set up a couple record players and they talked and they said, this is what we do. And we talked between the records and stuff. And I thought, that would be cool to do for a living. So ever since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be on the radio. So my education kind of went downhill from there because I thought, you know what, I'm not going to need to know how to type. I'm not going to need, biggest mistake I made in high school was not applying for speech class in time. So the speech class filled up. I couldn't get into speech class to learn how to publicly speak, so I had to learn on my own, teach myself, get laughed at. I dropped out of typing class because I thought, I'm going to be on the radio. What am I going to need to know how to type for? Every day. Every day I sit in front of one of these things. So, yeah. Learn how to type, kids. Okay. But then I started, I was working at Holiday Skate Center. A buddy of mine said, hey, a friend of mine is working part-time at Magic 98 up in North Muskegon. You ought to go apply. He's heading off to college. They're going to have an opening part-time. So I went and applied. I basically just walked into the place and, what do I have to do to get a job here? He said, put a demo tape together and get a resume together, drop it off, and we'll let you know what we think. So I did that. I went home, I recorded, I cut stuff out of the news, like articles or ads out of the newspaper, and just ad-libbed them on tape with music playing in the background off the radio. And it was a real crude demo tape and a resume that was basically a paper route, garbage route, and Holiday Skate Center DJ. That was the extent of my resume. And I sent it in to him. The guy's name was Dave Christian. And they called me that day and said, you start this weekend. And basically, I just started as a board op, just playing syndicated programs on records. Records, kids, look like this. This is actually an album. It's a very good album. It's in rough shape. Styx Paradise Theater. But that was the start of my radio career. Did that for a while. The radio station changed to WAVX, The Wave, and it was bought by a couple of guys that owned the hockey team in Muskegon, and they bought it to have a radio station to broadcast the hockey team on. And I was part-time at the time. So they fired everybody but me, figuring now we're paying him next to nothing. He shows up on time. We'll keep him on the payroll. So I was there for a few years. Radio station changed to WLCS, Classic Hits. That was a great, fun station to work for. Great people. Bill Spagnuolo was the programming director. Very cool dude. Fun to work for. Easy to work for. Taught me a lot about radio. Then from WLCS, went to management changed. I think ownership changed. Format changed. And the programming director said, you're too young for the format. And I was like, 20, 21. And they went from a classic hits format to like an R&B format. So they fired me. And I went to work then at WPBK, got a job at WPBK in Whitehall. Worked there for a few years, left there for 9 months, came back when I couldn't find a job in Baldwin, at the grocery store, at any radio station. Matter of fact, I applied at the very radio station I'm at right now. So after the 9 months in Baldwin, couldn't find a job, I went back to Muskegon, got a job back at the radio station I had left, WPBK, which at the time was Jumpin' Country, 97 Frog. And, yeah.
I remember that.
That was horrible. I mean, and worked there for a few years, left there, started at MRR 1017, went from doing overnights, basically overnight. I went from the overnight guy to the morning guy when they fired the morning guy. And they had a consultant that came in and said, hey, can you be here tomorrow at 5:30 in the morning? I'm like, yeah, I guess. And so that started my morning radio career, which lasted a few years. Then I got tired of it, waking up at 4:30 in the morning, and moved to afternoons. And then due to corporate downsizing, after the radio station had changed ownership a couple of times, my position was eliminated. And so I left there and went to work for a friend of mine at K-Rock 94.1 FM, where I'm at now. And other than a 6-year hiatus at the top 40 radio station up the dial, I've been here ever since.
Okay.
So that's 34 years in a nutshell. Chris Kraft, the Boatman. Well, my real first name is Chris, and go back to 1989, 90-ish, probably 89, when I started working at WPBK in Whitehall for Jay Ron and Sharon Lee. They were the management, and Sharon was the programming director of the country station in Whitehall, WPBK. And the general manager, Jay, great guy to work for. They were great people to work for, just really laid back, easygoing, fun people. And I wasn't on the air yet, and he said, "What are you going to call yourselves on the? What are you going to call yourself on the radio?" And I said, "I'll just use my regular name." He said, "No, you can't do that." I'm like, "Why not?" He says, "Well, you don't want 300-pound women showing up at your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, do you?" And I'm like, "If they bring beer, sure, why not?" So we had a laugh about that, and he's like, "No, you gotta come up with a radio name. Everybody has to have a radio name just so they have a little, anonymity or whatever." And that's the wrong word, but anyway. So being that I spent a lot of my youth in the area, in the White Lake area, my grandparents lived up on Old Channel Trail forever, for all of my youth, pretty much, until my grandmother passed away. But so I was familiar with the area, but hadn't been up there in a while. And so I took a look around, and I noticed a lot of marinas, and I remember fishing on White Lake, and I thought, man, I'm getting hungry. I better stop into Dog and Suds and grab a bite to eat. So I stopped into Dog and Suds right there on the river, and I looked over, and on the side of the building, in big yellow letters, it said Chris Kraft. It was a boat store. They sold boat supplies and did repairs and stuff. And on the side of the building, it said Chris Kraft in big yellow letters. And I thought, hey, my first name's Chris. I could change my last name to Kraft. That'd be a great name for the radio, Chris Kraft. A lot of marinas around here, boats. That'll work. So I went back to the radio station, and Jay said, "You come up with a radio name?" I said, "Yeah, I got a couple ideas." And I told him, Johnny Ray on WPBK, because it rhymed. And he's like, nah. He's like, "What else you got?" I said, "How about Chris Kraft?" And he's like, "Who do you think you are, the Boatman?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And he's like, "All right, go with that." And so I went with that and just referred to myself as Chris Kraft, the Boatman, and it stuck. And here we are. Chris Kraft, the Boatman on K-Rock. Still making a wake along the lakeshore. Sorry about all the erosion. I can put the headphones on.
No, it's okay.
My other job is landing planes at the airport. That's why I have this. It's not a budding metropolis like Chicago or Detroit, so I don't have to do it often. But every so often, they Nancy's medical taxi flies in. That's what we call Aeromed, and it comes right over the radio station. So if they do that while you're here, you'll definitely hear it because the building goes. Anyway. Well, there are a lot of stories I can't tell, and just to just because I don't know if the statute of limitations is up on him or not, and I don't want to incriminate myself. I'm kidding. He was a great guy. Him and Sharon hired me just on the word of LT, and LT said I worked with him at Classic Hits. He's a decent guy, shows up for work, and does his job. And So they hired me, and they basically said, you have carte blanche. Here's our music. Here's the computer that plays the commercials. Here's the carts, whatever. He says, just play the commercials, play whatever you want musically. They didn't have the format was country music. And they played everything from Tennessee Ernie Ford to Travis Tritt and everything in between, Alabama to whatever, A to Z. They played it all. They had it all there. And Jay was an old Nashville guy. So he had a lot of connections with record companies, and we'd get, the latest and greatest hit singles, I remember Garth Brooks, back before he was Garth, now he's like this icon, but back before anybody had hardly ever heard of him, he's like, yeah, this is some dude out of, well, I don't know where he is, but it sounds pretty good. Here, play this. And I played the 45 on a record, and I thought, man, this guy's going to be huge. He's going to be big. And obviously he was. Yeah. So it was fun to work with him.
Did he promote the first concert here for Leanne Rimes too?
I believe so, yeah. Oh, and that just reminded me of a funny story I could tell you that I don't know if people are familiar with the country artist Bobby Bare. Oh, yeah. He played at the, I believe it was the Helmet Theater at the time in Whitehall. He did a concert there, and it was a great show. And Jay had his greatest hits CD at the radio station. And before the show, before he left that day, he's like, "Here, bring this to the show and have Bobby autograph it for you." I'm like, "Okay." And this was his, from the radio station's music collection. He's like, "Bring this to the show and have Bobby autograph it for you." I'm like, "Cool." So we went to the show, met Bobby afterwards in the basement in the green room, and partied like only Bobby Bare and J. Ron could. And that was a great memory. He autographed the CD. I still have it today in my music collection. And that was just, they were a lot of fun to work for, and had a lot of fun working for him. I would walk past his office every so often, and he'd be talking to, like little Jimmy Dickens or, some other country music legend, and they'd just be reminiscing about, the fun they'd had back in the day. And I'm just like, man, it'd be fun to meet some of them guys. I talked to Charlie Daniels once through Jay, but just said hello to him over the phone. But that was, early on, people that taught me a lot about the business. Scott Taylor, LT, in between Bill Spagnola, Dave Myers, and I could just name drop my good buddy Bill Marshall. He was fun to work with. Andy O'Reilly, just a lot of people that that taught me a lot and were just generally good people to work with and even hang out with outside of the job aspect of it, So that's just, a handful of people. Al Larson, he was a good dude I worked with. Dusty Scott. The list goes on and on, but those are just off the top of my head.
I got to tell you, because
Oscar Osbo.
Yeah. But the one time I remember is when I was working at KBZ and you were working there for a quick time.
Yeah, brief moment in time.
Jobs or something.
Yep.
And I
think I got the job through Manpower, actually. I think I got the gig through Manpower.
It was Walt, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was.
But anyway,
Walter.
you were running the board while I was down at the Heritage Landing doing, there was nothing going on in the afternoon.
Uh-huh.
You were running the board and you and I were talking back and forth. I think that was the most fun I think I ever had when we were doing that. That was a ball.
That was a good gig.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Yeah. I enjoyed it. Jim Cox, there's another guy.
Yeah.
Fun to work with. Yeah, good times, for sure. Ooh, gonna put me on the spot. My favorite radio station I ever worked at? Boy, oh boy. you know, it's hard to name just one. You know, there's 2 or 3 that, and it more had to do with the people that I worked with and worked for than anything else. You know, because I've done every format under the sun, as you're well aware that, you know, you're in the radio, you got to be flexible. But looking back, I would say the funnest place to work for was probably 1017 MRR when it was owned by Goodrich Radio Marketing, because it seemed like, you know, back in the 90s, in the mid 90s when I worked there were a lot of concerts going on. There were a lot of bands coming through Grand Rapids and West Michigan in general, and we would get tickets to almost every single one. And so every weekend we were going to concerts, hanging out with rock stars, going backstage, doing a meet and greet. We had a whole thing where at Summer Celebration we had this whole thing set up. We'd do a meet and greet where our promotions person, CJ, she would lead the front of the line and I would bring up the rear just to make sure everybody got in and out smoothly and met, you know, the rock stars and all that. And it worked well. I would say that was the funnest because you got to hang out with cool people and meet rock stars, and it was just, you know, it was a blast. Yeah. So I just did my show live from Heritage Landing that day. Poison was playing. Some buddies of mine from in town that were in a band opened up for them, and so that was really cool. Actually got to interview the drummer from Poison during the day when they did their sound check, and then he came over and sat down and chatted. And at the time, there was this deal. The lead singer Brett Michaels had a like a fan club thing, and as a member of the fan club, you'd get to meet him you'd have a chance to meet him at a gig, you know, after the show, do a meet and greet. And so there was maybe a handful of people that were part of the fan club that were at the show that got chosen to meet him, you know, like maybe a dozen, I don't know. So they went back and met him, and then his tour manager came out, and he apparently told her, go get the radio guy. Find the radio guy. Because all afternoon I was playing like nothing but Poison music and just promoting the show every break. Hey, we're live from Heritage Landing. Poison's here live tonight. Get your tickets before they're gone, blah, blah, blah. There ended up being, I think, like close to 20,000 people there at the show. And I had the pleasure of going up and saying hi to everybody, you know, after Tim and Tom did their thing. And so that was cool. And then after the show, for the meet and greet, he sends his tour manager looking for the radio guy, and that was me. I had no idea. He was down at the Omni, and they had us on in the free weight room, and he's down there working out. And so all he's hearing is me talking about the show, and he's like, I want to thank that dude. And so they did the show. After the show, he did his meet and greet with the fan club members, and then he told his road manager, go find the radio guy. And I was still backstage with, you know, doing the meet and greet stuff, and she came and got a hold of me. And then so I got to meet him and talk to him a little bit. We had Rolling Rock together because he was, you know, he's from Pennsylvania, band's from Pennsylvania, and then I guess they had a sponsorship. He opened up the refrigerator and it was full of Rolling Rock beer on the bus. That was fun. And he was sitting there autographing guitars for the Red Cross and whoever. And so that's another interesting, fun story. As far as work environment, I'd have to say my favorite place to work is where I'm working right now. Because, as you know, radio can be very, very formatted, very, especially corporate radio, you know, they've got this scope on where you're going to play this many songs, and you're going to do this and this and this, and everything's by the book, and da-da-da and da-da-da. Here, it's pretty laid back. It's a small company. I mean, I think there's like maybe 20 employees, if that. And we're like a family. It's like a mom and pop operation, you could call it. And the people that own it are local people, very easy to work for, very laid back. I can play whatever I want. And so that takes a lot of the pressure off, because, working in corporate radio, man, you had to do this, this, and this. You had to talk at a certain time. You had to back time to the top of the hour, make sure you were right at the top of the hour to meet the news, and there was all this stress, and it's like, Now it's just like, kind of like when I worked at WPBK. Yeah, just, play music, play the commercials, and have fun. And that's how it's been for the past, I've been here now almost 10 years. I was here for a brief stint, 2002 to 2004, and then there was a hiatus, and then that's when I went to work at the top 40 station up the dial for 6 years. But yeah, I would say my favorite place to work is where I'm working right now, because after this interview, if you drive around town, if you drive down to the lake, you'll know Ludington is a beautiful place. Love it here. I've lived here for almost 20 years now and wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And I've had opportunities, offers to do radio in other towns, and I'm just like, nah, I'm happy here and content. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that went on off the air, that took place off the air, that isn't suitable for broadcast or even to repeat. Just the nature of the business itself back in the day and how much it's changed over the years. Like I said, when I was working in Muskegon, we had concert tickets to every show that came through the area, almost. And somebody had to go to those shows. And a lot of times it was, if you want to go, you can go. If you don't, you don't. I went to a concert in Grand Rapids at the Orbit Room. I think it was the Orbit Room at the time. That venue, anyway. And it was Ronnie James Dio playing. And he was about this tall. He was about 4 feet tall. Just tiny little guy. We had backstage passes through the radio station. We took some people backstage, and they did a meet and greet. He was in the dressing room, and I was outside kind of coordinating, kind of doing our whole thing that CJ and I did at these gigs, where we'd take a half a dozen people back there to meet the band. And a buddy of mine was there with his girlfriend, and she worshipped Ronnie James Dio, her favorite artist ever. And I only had 2 backstage passes. I was wearing one, and my buddy Jason was wearing the other one. He's like, man, my girlfriend really wants to go meet him. Is there any way you could get her a backstage pass? I pulled the backstage pass off of me, and I stuck it on her. And I said, go meet your idol. So they did. They got his autograph. CJ, God love her, she came out, and she had an autograph for me, personalized, which I still have today. And my buddy's like, dude, that was so cool. Let's go over to the merch table. I'm going to buy you whatever you want. He says, pick a shirt. So I picked a shirt. It's a $30 t-shirt. Way overpriced, but worth it. And I still have that shirt today. And matter of fact, I just wore it on Halloween because it's Dio and it looks real scary. Anyway, that's a fond memory I have. There are some not so fond memories, but yeah, some pretty interesting stories. Partying like a rock star with rock stars is something not a lot of people get to do, and I still shake my head and think, wow, what a time that was, and what trouble we could have gotten into. Getting drunk with rock stars, that's nothing new, A lot of people have done that, and just to see that some of them were real down-to-earth people, just doing something they loved. I was for lack of a better term, in the same boat. I was doing something I love to do and getting paid to do it. You're going to pay me to go hang out at a concert and, meet rock stars and take people backstage to meet rock stars and just hang out and have a great time. I met both my ex-wives through the radio, through working in radio, actually. Those are funny stories, maybe for another time. Again, the statute of limitations, I don't know if, I don't want them to sue me for defamation of character or anything, so I better not tell those stories. But suffice it to say, I met 2 ex-wives through radio, And I also met some very cool people who were rock stars and some very people that weren't so cool that were rock stars. And I've only got into the business because when I was 8 years old, there was the career day, and I thought that would be cool to do and get paid for it. I want to do that. I want to do what those guys are doing. Play music for people that makes them happy on the radio. And I've been doing it now 33, 34 years. You know. That's me, Ma. I made it. I made it.
All right,
man.
That's one thing I got that you don't have, man. I did Sonny for almost a year.
Well, I worked in the building.
Yeah,
I worked
MRR, right?
Yeah, I worked down the hall
yeah.
at 1017. But that was after Jim and Joe had left. They were no longer with the company.
Oh, okay.
But I remember listening to those guys thinking, man, they're having a blast. That sounds like fun. Maybe I'll get to work there someday.
They're still doing it, too. I mean, Joe's in GR now, but...
Yeah. I don't know what happened to the...
Biggins is over in Saginaw.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Is he still doing radio?
Yeah.
No kidding. Nice.
So,
Yeah, those guys had fun. Duffy, I remember Duffy, Chris Duffy. He's in Chicago now. I think at WGN. I think he's their production guy.
did you ever work with Mark Frost at all?
Mark Frost.
He worked at Sonny, too. I was just about the same time as those guys were there.
Boy,
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
But I just thought that was kind of an interesting one to...
I worked with him.
Who?
Dan Mesher. He lives up here now. He worked at Sunny FM for a while.
How about Sweet Lou Mitchell?
Sweet Lou, yeah.
Yeah,
Sweet
okay.
Lou Whitaker. No, Sweet Lou with Louie. Yeah, he lives
Yeah.
up here now too, or further north.
Yeah, further north,
Lou
yeah.
does. He lives up, I think, by Thompsonville.
Louis, the first station he worked at was the one that I was at Rock 95.
Oh yeah.
Way back.
WRNF.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he was
I remember that
he was just out of school and he went there.
I think I still have a T-shirt.
Do you really?
Yeah, I'll look for it.
I'll
And if
see
I
it.
do, I'll send you a photograph of
Okay,
it if I
yeah.
still have it.
Because I still got I was thinking about that. I still got a bumper sticker on one of my old toolboxes. So, of Rock 95. Rock 95. Port
When
City City FM.
When my dad passed away a couple of years ago, and I went down to Twin Lake to clean out his house, I went into my old bedroom and I had bumper stickers from Sunny FM, Rock 95, Magic 98, The Wave, MR, all those stations
Yeah.
up all over the walls of my bedroom.